Welcome to the Dawn and Steve Plus podcast, fueled by Raphael's Roastery and supported by you. Connect to us on socials or dawnandsteveplus.com.
You know, I sometimes wonder if this generation is getting a bad rap, or are they really not as resilient as previous generations have been? Phil, you've been helping people deal with issues, trauma, struggle, all kinds of things for years. Do we tend to see resiliency be on the decline, or do you think that we just kind of are giving a generation kind of a bad rap right now?
Well, like a lot of other things, I think the answer may be a little bit of both.
Okay.
I'm of the age now, I've done a couple of generations of helping a couple of generations,
Yeah.
you know, kids now that are not kids anymore, people I saw before. And, you know, resilience, part of that depends on the definition. You know, resilience can be just tough, stiff upper lip, don't talk about it, just deal with it, just stuff it all down and move on, which is not really what resilience means.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound right.
But if that's the definition,
Well,
then yes.
Put your big boy pants on, right?
That's
That's what-
I don't call that
No?
resilience, though.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
don't.
Not resilience.
Okay,
No, that's not resilience. It looks resilient,
sure.
but and there is, you know, we talk about social media a lot because it is a huge impact on culture, and so part of the social media culture having to do with sound bites and comparison, those kinds of things, really does create this environment for people that have a really steady diet of that to lack resilience, because resilience and a thing called EQ are really closely related.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
EQ.
EQ. Yeah, think about IQ, you know, intelligence quotient. EQ is how emotionally intelligent are you?
Okay.
Like, can you navigate feelings? Can you navigate relationship?
So I think of my social media use. And so I kind of think the rest of the world uses it like I do because I only know what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Then I talk to other people who are on social media all the time,
Yeah.
or a game in their hand, or like I even think some of my family members like eating breakfast and playing a game. And I think, okay, now these phones are changing our brains.
Yes.
And if we are on, say, more than a couple hours a day, what is that physiologically doing to our brains?
Yeah, it's rewiring our ability to delay gratification. It's rewiring our ability to maintain attention. It's maintaining our ability to have conversations, face-to-face conversations. And when we do have face-to-face conversations, it is affecting our ability to have longer conversations that have depth and substance to them and breadth. So it really is changing how the brain is operating relationally, and that it has a ton to do with resilience.
All right. So if we maybe suspect we don't have the resiliency that we want, or, you know, we're looking at our kids and we say, man, they don't seem to have the resiliency that I feel like our generation had.
Yeah.
We want to build resilience, whether it's in our kids or even in our own lives. How do you begin to build that?
Yeah. Let's talk about the definition first. It's really kind of a two-phase definition. Resilient, something that's resilient, it can endure a lot of things. It can take on all kinds of trauma, punishment, so to speak. And it doesn't even mean people, like a leather couch can be resilient. You know, stains and stuff spilling on it and all that kind of stuff, it just keeps on. And it also means to spring back. And so taking the emotional form of that, like resilient people can contain feelings, resilient people can live in their story, live in other people's story, and they can bounce back when they've had something happen. And so part of that development of that is, can I maintain my own containment, my own feelings about my life, and can I do a very biblical example of a very resilient person? There are lots of them in there, is like the psalmist. David, where he's really good at lamenting.
Yeah.
He's really good at telling the truth about what's going on in his life. And he's really good at admitting when he has need, and he's really good at telling the truth about when he's been harmed, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I'm thinking back to the suck it up buttercup
Yeah.
resilient definition and how it's not really resilience. But if you grew up with that kind of definition, and then you get to a certain place where you think, okay, I can't contain your story. I can barely contain mine. It's all in boxes. And the Lord confronts you in his kindness so that you can start to let some of that go so you can really enter into true resiliency. How can you help somebody go, oh, wait, that's not being resilient? Not just hushing and doing what I need to do and persevering? Because it's a massive difference when you figure that out.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you probably know where this is going. It's going to a relationship. And so here's the thing, resiliency, we end up, I can't think of the author's name. It's not original with me, but it's an author. She says that we take turns being resilient for one another. Like resilience is I guess you would call it a moving target. It's like you don't go, okay, well, now I'm resilient and I'll never not be not resilient again. It's like, okay, sometimes I can bounce back, and sometimes I'm sleep deprived. I've got a bad diet. I'm burned out. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Or I'm just having a rough day. Like I've got nothing but bad news. And I need my friend Steve with a cup of coffee to be resilient for me and with me and to absorb a lot of what I've been going through, for example. And so resiliency is not a terminal destination. Resiliency is something that I practice. And as my ability to tell the truth in relationship, to let other people do that with me, it grows. But we have to do that with one another. It's communal and it's consistent reps.
And for some of us, that's probably going to take a little bit of a mind shift because when I, hear you say that makes perfect sense. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, well, that feels weak. That doesn't feel resilient
Right.
to be able to sit down with that cup of coffee and to ask you to be resilient for me. And so I love hearing you say that, but for some of us, we're like, that doesn't feel resilient.
Yes.
Phil, do I just need to redefine my definition? Do I just need to start thinking of resiliency differently?
Well, if you think about just talking about the epistles, how many times we see the writers of the epistles, Peter comes to mind, Paul comes to mind for sure, talking about, hey, this is what happens, this develops character, suffering develops character, perseverance and resilience are really closely related. So you see both of those lists. Peter has a list like that, kind of a staircase, and so does Paul. They both talk about how, hey, if you will endure suffering, and those epistles are written in the context of the body of Christ, if you will do that, and you can almost always, behind every sentence, you can put the word together. If you will do this together with one another, that's what this builds as an individual, but it's not made to be contained just with an individual. It's designed to be relational. It's communal. And so it's not just this individual, I'm going to suck this up and just march through this thing. It's like, no, I need other people to do that with me because there's coming a day when I'm going to do that with you.
In the generation that is younger, say, than me, a couple generations down, if the brain has been rewired and there's no resiliency, and they hear you say, this can be done, but they feel hopeless. That person feels hopeless because they're fighting against what the neurons are doing now.
That's right.
Hope? Is there hope?
The hope is in repetitions. The hope is in the Lord doing a work through repetitions.
Okay.
It really does require, it's hard to overestimate how addictive what we're talking about really is. Social media, games. I mean, they are highly addictive for a reason. And so therefore, when we're dealing with any addiction, we've got to go through a period of detox. And so we theorists and family systems people and therapists, and we love to think, well, we're just going to map this thing out. And once in a while, and resilience is one of these topics, once in a while, it just requires a person to say, I'm going to put this thing down and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to get my reps and having conversations with real people and getting real sunlight on my face and getting on terra firma and walking. I'll tell you a kind of a hidden part of this, a little bit of a digression, but sometimes where it can be hidden, we've talked about EMDR before, the necessity of moving your body bilaterally, arms and legs, moving and walking. Notice how a lot of games require bilateral stimulation, working a phone. And so those things are also soothing to the nervous system At the same time, they're diminishing resilience to have a real conversation. And so I don't know the developers were trying to do that, but they have developed something with video games where you're moving your body and you're still not in relationship. You're with the screen. And so it does take reps to literally put that down and detox. Another fancy word is titration, to titrate yourself down and really and truly sit across from another human being and have a conversation. That's how resilience is built.
I'm so funny. Not at a coffee shop.
Yeah,
with everybody's phones out.
Everybody's doing that. I was at an amusement park the other day, and it was so funny to watch people stand in line for a ride, and probably a good 80% of the people were on devices. You know, where they're standing in line with their friends, with their family members, with people that they came to an amusement park with, and they are on their devices, not building resiliency.
Yes.
You know,
and it's easy to pick on, quote unquote, and at the same time, it is so in our face about what has happened to culture with conversations, and resilience is built through containing feelings and hearing feelings and working with people and talking with people face to face about what's really going on in life. And that's, you notice in the greatest generation, how grateful I am for the men and women who fought. And one thing that happened that was a severe oversight, we began to assign nobility to people who were not talking about their lives, not talking about their trauma. And so their children grew up in homes where these men, thinking they were doing the right thing, thinking they were building resilience, what was happening was the children were limbically smelling the trauma that these soldiers went through, but no one was talking about it. No one was saying anything. And so they had to make up stories. And so a couple of generations later, you've got children. I'm not saying this is a direct cause and effect, but people stopping talking about what was going on internally eventually led to this downstream. One of the downstream casualties of that is people not being able to tell the truth of their stories and having someone absorb that story with them. And that built, then these soldiers were super resilient in so many ways, and that is not a knock on the generation. Thank the Lord for them and what they did for our country. And one of the things that happened downstream is this idea of resiliency, meaning button it up and just go do it. What got lost was the sharing of that trauma story and the fun stories and just stories in general. And now we've moved to this digital age where people's attention spans and ability to absorb is way lower.
So much lower than the generations in the past. And then you might wonder what's going to happen with the next generation when these young people start having children and they're already on their devices all the time.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost like it reminds me in COVID when we had the masks on and babies were born during that season and they couldn't regulate off mom and dad's face because they couldn't see mom and dad's face. It's kind of like that when you've got the phone in front of you and nobody can regulate off you.
It really is.
I mean, what a disaster this is going to be for our society. I mean, we're talking about, we're saying, yes, this is impeding our brains and our relationships. Are we doing anything about it? Are you seeing success?
Yes. And one of the things that's happening is, and this is completely anecdotal, it's just what seems to be true for me. I'm hearing more in Tin Man, the organization I work with, we're having a growth of groups, in-person groups, sitting in a circle, doing story groups and doing check-in groups and doing process groups. And that's really, I'm grateful for it. It's becoming more of a thing than it was. But, you know, you've heard me mention Hebb's axiom, 1949. Donald Hebb said, neurotransmitters that wire together, fire together. That fire together, wire together. And what we're wiring our brains to the device and not to other people. And so it takes personal contact to do that. And so I do see people moving more toward, ironically, there are apps out there now that will help parents log the hours their children are outdoors playing. So it's kind of ironic. Yeah. But we are, there's a movement now. I feel it. I see it in our society to move more toward, let's just get face to face and put these things away.
Some generations, though, probably have never done that well, never seen that done well, and may, recognize the fact that this is an issue, but I don't even know how to begin to do what you're describing right there. Would I be correct in guessing that in those groups that are gathering and they're sitting in those circles and sharing those stories, that most of them are probably over the age of 40?
Yes.
All right. So,
yes.
I'm thinking that, for that younger generations that have not ever seen this really done well, they wouldn't even know how to start.
That's
this.
right.
You say, go have a conversation with somebody, go grab a cup of coffee with somebody. And I walk into a coffee shop and I've got two, 22-year-olds sitting across the table from each other, both on their devices.
Yes.
How do you start?
A dear friend of mine, he was in his 80s. He passed away several years ago. He said to me one time, and a mutual friend, he said, "There's a day coming when we're going to have to teach the younger generation how to have a conversation."
Yeah.
He said that, and
I think we're there.
We're there, and I have done that. I don't work with a lot of young people, but the ones I do, I will literally say that to them. Like, you have been raised by and large in a digital culture and when there's no exchange. And so part of what we're going to do is and I will say to them, I need you to turn your phone off or leave it in your car. And we're going to talk about your story in here, and we're going to use words. And I will point to the sheet of paper on the floor with 8 feeling words on it. And I say, we're going to start right here. And I will tell them, like, I'm not saying this to make fun of you or to dismiss you at all, but I know you don't know how to do it. And so let me show you. And if our generation would be far more intentional in the Church of Jesus Christ, for sure, if we would bring these young men, these young women up and saying, let me do this with you, because I know that you've got all kinds of conveniences literally at your fingertips. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but let's add in having real life conversations with people amidst all that. And what happens is, as an outgrowth, like the fruit of the Spirit, we can't manufacture that. We can't manufacture resilience. It's getting repetitions of having conversations and face-to-face with other people.
And adults are going to have to make an effort as well. You're talking about the amusement park. I was having lunch with a friend the other day and glance over, and it seems to be a parent and a child, probably teenager, having lunch, both on their devices. I don't think they said a word to one another. And I thought, is this just food? Is this just food time? And again, you're saying, I'm not to be critical. It's observational when you just look at folks and you're like, how is this beneficial to you as a parent to know what's going on in your young person's life? And how is it beneficial for your young person to know that they have somebody, an advocate for them, that will enter into whatever's going on in their lives right now? It just makes me sad. Yeah. Really sad. So speak for a minute to a parent that hears you and goes, yeah, I know. Okay, yeah, but what do you want to come out of these relationships? Are you missing your kid at all? How do we kind of re-engage our parent brain?
One of the things that, and I think, lots of people that do a lot of parenting work will say, the most important thing a parent can do for their children is deal with their own stuff. And so if I'm a parent and I'm spending a whole lot of time on my computer, my iPad, on my phone, the first thing I got to do before I talk to that kid is get rid of my own. And start having those conversations with them. And that seems like such a simple thing, and yet we will forget that very easily. And, for this conversation about resilience, we are talking a lot about the digital age because they are connected to one another. So, the topic began with, hey, what in the world is resilience? Yeah. It's the ability to bounce back and the ability to endure, to stand, to persevere, Scripture calls it, to persevere under suffering, under how life works. And so if our generation will look at what am I doing that's blocking me from having conversations with them about this, about me and them, that's a super important first step. Will the parents or grandparents or whomever step off into that first and then begin to teach them how to have a face-to-face conversation?
Yeah, so important.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we let go of. And not necessarily on purpose. It's that slow fade we always talk about, where you just picked up your phone and then, oh, look, we can do this. And the next thing you know, you don't have any interpersonal relationships. And when I hear you say it's going to take effort, It's going to take intentionality. We use that word a lot, but it's true. And then the maybe detoxing and repetition so that the resiliency gets built in. It can be learned.
I think one of the greatest inventions in the world is the fire pit. Because people are talking about, hey, we were sitting by the fire pit. Like, yes, that. The fire pit is a great in a coffee shop if you're not on your device. But there is a movement, getting back to what you mentioned earlier, things like that, like sitting at the fire pit and having conversations with people. It's of utmost importance, and it really does get us back into how God created the body to be and the family to interact with each other.
Games too. Game table. That for us. It's game table. Well, thank you so much, Phil Herndon. All the stuff in the show notes, tinmanministries.org.
Thanks for joining us for the Dawn and Steve Plus podcast. We're a listener-supported, non-profit podcast, and we're grateful for your generous support. You can give at dawnandsteveplus.com. Our producer is yours truly, Stephen Briggs, with assistance from Chris Westmoreland. Please like and subscribe to Dawn and Steve Plus anywhere you get your podcasts and on all our socials. Links to what we talk about and to Raphael's Roastery are in the show notes below. Thanks for joining us and being our plus one.